Good morning, everyone. We are back to the headphone comparison slash review process. And the headphones that we are testing in this series is the Bass Audio G12. I did the unboxing about a week and a half ago, I think, something like that. And now it's time to get into the nitty gritty. Today's video is going to be about the bass response, and we have 3 songs queued for that perspective. We have Pure Water, Drum Solo, and Angel by Massive Attack. Now, before we get any further, I want to emphasize a couple of things. There was some commentary in the unboxing video about the G12. There was also some commentary in a post I had made on YouTube indicating that I had purchased the G12. And some people had mentioned that these headphones, the G12, are Chinese made. They're not. They're all American made. They're made in America. The company is based in America. As far as I can tell from their website and the marketing, it looks like they source their materials from within the United States, but I can't really be certain about that. So I can say that it's not a Chinese brand. It's an American brand. And if that matters to you, then that's a factor for consideration. As far as build quality goes, I've had these for about 2 weeks now, and I have to say they seem pretty sturdy. At first, they seemed relatively heavy to me in comparison to something like the SR80E from Grado or even the GS1000E, because those headphones are very, very light. Those are super, super comfortable because of their light weight. So anything that's anything that's heavier than either the SR80 or the GS1000 is going to feel like a ton of bricks on your head, when in reality, it really isn't. It's just in comparison to the Grados. And the only reason we compare the G12 to the Grados is because they have such a similar physical look to them to the Grados. And so people have been discussing that these are Grado knockoffs. And we will get to that. We will do a comparison between the G12 and the SR80, as well as with the GS1000. I don't have any other Grados to compare, but the ones I do have, I do intend to compare with the GS12 or the G12. Okay, so let's get on with it. Let's get to the actual sound comparison. So let's start with Pure Water. I have the GS12, I keep saying GS12, it's not the GS12. I have the G12 on my head plugged into the JDS Labs Element DAC amp. The volume is currently set at 9 o'clock, which is loud enough for me to hear the song without having any other outside noise disturb the listening experience. All right, so let's start with Pure Water, and here we go. Now, this song should have clear vocals, but it should also have a bass emphasis because it's a hip-hop song. 9 o'clock is, like I said, loud enough for me to listen to the song without any external noises affecting the listening experience, but I'm going to increase the volume to 11 o'clock, and 11 o'clock is very loud, and at 11 o'clock I hear that thumping bass. It really just sounds like thump, thump, boom, boom. It's not overwhelming at all. So it doesn't sound like it's distorting. It certainly doesn't sound like it's interfering with the mids. In fact, the mids sound crystal clear even with the bass playing. The bass is very similar to a closed bag headphone, a decent closed bag headphone. I'm not talking about the XC. I'm not talking about the Atticus. I'm not talking about the One More. I'm talking about just general closed bag headphones of good quality. The G12 has that thump. You hear the resonance of the bass slam. It goes boom. So there's a bit of lingering resonance there, which a lot of open back headphones simply cannot provide. And if they do provide it, then it starts distorting and interfering with the mids. But I can say without any hesitation that the mids are very clear. There's no harshness to the mids at all. No distortion. No melding. So here at this point of the song, about 1 minute and 30 seconds, you hear dun-dun, dun-dun, dun-dun. And that's like a heartbeat of the song. That's the drum. Dun-dun, dun-dun. You could hear the slam, and it's a lingering effect, but the mids are separated. And I would say there's a hard line separation between the bass and the mids on this song. So I'm going to increase the volume again to 12 o'clock. And at 12 o'clock, no distortion, no harshness. The bass is crystal clear, smooth, no lingering effect that then starts distorting into the mids. Because what happens sometimes with some headphones is that if you increase the power to the headphones, there are some parts of the driver that start distorting, like the bass response will start distorting, or you get a treble peak somewhere that'll just jump out at you. And at noon, which is very loud for these headphones, I hear no distortion at all. Okay, so the takeaway for me on this song is, if you put this up against the G12, up against something like the HD700, the HD700 has about the same amount of soundstage. I don't think I'd really be able to tell the difference between the soundstage on these. But the HD700 has a less impactful bass. It sounds lighter. It sounds a little bit more tinny. It sounds a bit more metallic. And here's what I mean by that. There are open back headphones and some closed back headphones that when you have a bass instrument, there's no lingering effect to that bass, especially if it's a kind of a subwoofer type sound, right? So there's different types of bass instruments, obviously. You have a typical drum that has a sharp slap to it with the drumstick, something like that, which we'll get to in one of our songs here. And then there's the subwoofer type effect, boom, 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 something like that. And that subwoofer type effect is really what I'm talking about with Pure Water. And it should linger, right? Boom, boom. And that's exactly how the song was mixed, and that's how you should hear it. Some headphones take that subwoofer type effect, and it rolls off so quickly that you really don't get the linger, and it just sounds Do you hear the difference? So some headphones do this with the bass effect or the subwoofer effect, boom, boom, boom. It's very quick. Whereas with the G12, what I hear is more of a linger, boom, 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 and that's the type of subwoofer effect I'm talking about that I think is really the critical aspect of Pure Water. Then there's the flip side. When headphones do produce that sub bass, subwoofer type effect, sometimes it just gets really muddy with the mids because it just keeps lingering and it keeps going. Well, not so with the G12 on this song. You can hear a clear separation between the mids and the bass. So in my opinion, I think that there is a very good separation between the two on this song. And on top of that, you really do hear the sub bass emphasis without the distortion. Let's go to drum solo. And drum solo is the one that has all of that riffing on the drums. You get the drum strikes. You should get a sharp, slapping type effect on top of the drums when the drummer is riffing. So let's start off with that. The first thing I want to listen to, however, is the moment you press play on this song, on this particular track, you hear the audience yelling and screaming because this was recorded live. And a lot of headphones kind of roll that off, which is good because you don't want your ears pierced. And then there are some headphones that accentuate it and it really, really hurts. Let's see where the G12 live. So I'm going to bring the volume down to 9 o'clock. And here we go with drum solo. Yep, no ear piercing. It was just really well controlled. So I'm going to increase the volume to 12. And one of the things you should be able to hear is like the bottom of the drum falling out, boing, boing, boing. And I hear it. It's just about there. So I'm going to stop. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to increase the volume from noon to about 1:30. Okay, so we're about 1:30 here. I'm going to restart. And so here's how it starts. The first time you start hearing the drums, you should hear a boom, boom, like the bottom of the drum is falling out. There are only a handful of headphones that really reproduce that type of effect, at least the ones that I've heard. The vast majority of headphones that I've listened to cannot do it. They come so close sometimes, and yet they just miss the mark. A few more decibels, a little bit more reach in the sub bass region, and you might be able to hear it, but they simply fall short. And I think I heard it with the G12, but let's start again. 1:30 on the amp. Here we go. And 1:30 is excessively loud. This is louder than anybody should ever listen to a song to. And here's the drum. Yep, I definitely hear the bottom of the drum falling out. Boing, boing. It could be, there should be a little bit more reach there to really get that effect. The boing, boing, it just about grazes it, I would say. So here's how it's supposed to sound. Boing, boing. And here's how the G12 reproduces it. Bung, bung. So you may not be able to hear the difference. And my reproduction, my example is very imperfect. However, what I'm trying to relay is that it just barely gets to that bottom of the drum falling out effect. Just about gets it. And if it had slightly less reach into the bass, sub-bass, then you would not hear it, like a lot of other headphones. But with a slightly more reach, you would hear it even more, and you would hear that boing, boing, the actual bottom of the drum type effect. The G12 sits somewhere in the middle. It doesn't quite give it to you all the way, but it doesn't hide it either. So it's an interesting amalgam that I haven't heard before, at least to my recollection. Let's keep going. The bass is very fast. The drums are boom, 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 boom. You go from one to the other. The lingering effect is very, very slow, or very, very fast. Now, it's definitely not as fast as, say, a planar magnetic driver. Those are vastly different. But for the drivers like the XC and LCD2, those will have a slightly faster bass response. The dynamic driver in the G12 is really well tuned, however. You could still get a fast bass response, but there is a bit of lingering effect there, which is natural with dynamic drivers. We're getting into the bass riff, the drum riff, and I hear a couple of things. So I hear almost like there's something laid over the drum head, right? Something muffling the drum just a little bit. Now, when the drumstick comes down on the drum head, it's supposed to have a very sharp thwack, thwack type effect. And I hear it blunted on the G12, much like I hear it blunted on the vast majority of headphones. But it doesn't sound distorted, and it certainly doesn't sound like all the bass energy is gone. It's just that the initial slap on top of the drum head is a little blunt, and it goes boom, boom, boom. You can still hear the energy. Now, the other thing is you could hear the cymbals, and the cymbals are crystal clear without being harsh. So let's keep going. There's great left and right stereo imaging here. He's on the left side of the ear cup, but then he's on the right side of the ear cup riffing. Let's go back a little bit and listen to the drum riff again. Yeah, almost like there's a thin layer of something over the drum head. And it causes a bit of muffling effect to the drum. You can still hear the rumble, though, when he's hitting boom, 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 boom. So that could be the kick drum. It could be the drum head itself. I'm not quite sure what I'm hearing, but there is a bit of muffling effect. Certainly nothing that would make me say that the bass response is muffled. So there's a difference. Muffling effect, in my opinion, is that it's not the bass slam, the drum head spike that I'm trying to listen for, but it's also not muffled in such a way that it starts muffling the cymbals or it starts muffling the next drum strike. It doesn't do that. Okay, so now let us go to Angel by Massive Attack. Now, Angel has layers and layers and layers of bass and sub-bass, and let's see how the G12 reacts. I'm going to bring the volume down to 12 o'clock, and here we go. You can definitely hear that sub-bass rumble. You know, very, very obvious. And now you have the drum coming in, and the sub-bass rumble is clearly separated from the drum, so the two don't meld. Now you have a synth sound that just came in that's also separated from the sub-bass and the drum. So you have three layers now that are separated. The sub-bass rumble continues throughout the song, so it doesn't fall off. It sounds the same as it did at the beginning of the song. The drum sounds clear, no distortion. Now you have the kind of horns or something that came in. That's also separate from all the other elements we just talked about. So that's a fourth layer that is audible separately from the other instruments we were listening to. So when everything is playing right now around 1 minute with the vocalist in, I hear the vocalist clearly separated from the sub-bass rumble. I hear the drum separated from the vocalist and the sub-bass rumble. And I hear the synth sound separated from all the other stuff. So it's a very, very good separation. Now, it's not a hardline separation all across. So there's a little bit of melding between the sub-bass and bass when everything is playing just a little bit, but you can still hear the different character of each instrument and element in the song. The mids are crystal clear. They're not overpowered by any of the other instruments. The drum is now playing with a bass guitar, and you could hear the bass guitar clearly separate from that drum. The bass guitar seems to be further back from the drum in the mix. And now the vocalist is back in, and you could hear the vocalist separate from the bass guitar, separate from the drum, separate from the rumble in the background. And now you should be able to hear right around now a synth sound, or it could be a guitar. I can't really can't tell what it is, since the mixing process here is a little vague. So Massive Attack uses a lot of computer-generated sounds, like the synth sound, and then they also have guitars. And there are times when I simply can't tell if it's a guitar, an electric guitar, or if it's a synth sound, because it just comes in momentarily. And I would guess that the last 15 seconds of the song there was an electric guitar, which I can hear clearly separated from the vocalist. Now you're at the crescendo, you hear the guitars, the drum, the sub-bass rumble, all three elements separate from each other, no muffling effect at all. Okay. So let's talk about conclusions. I am, I said this before. I think that I was pleasantly surprised by the bass response on these headphones. And the reason I'm pleasantly surprised is because open back headphones tend to have a really bad reputation for bass reproduction, right? Even really costly open back headphones, HD 700, HD 800, they have the tendency to roll off the bass so that it sounds very light, in the sense that you don't get the sub-bass rumble, and you don't get the lingering effect of certain bass instruments that should have the lingering effect. Now, in contrast, you have the G12 that does provide some more of that substance in the bass. You get a bit more emphasis in the bass instruments than I've heard typically in open back headphones. You get a lingering effect to certain bass instruments, which I think should be present. And so the G12 reminds me of a closeback, a very good pair of closeback headphones, but in an open back format. Now, what about the soundstage? Now, I would say this is at least average soundstage, which is fine, especially for the price. Currently, these headphones go for about $150 on Amazon. If you go to Bass Audio's website, I think they're selling it for like $350. I could be mistaken, but I think that's the price last time I checked. And so I'm just looking at it at the cheapest price you can buy it officially, which is from Amazon at $150. And so for $150, the bass effect here is, in my opinion, for an open back pair of headphones, really natural, where a lot of open back headphones tend to roll off that bass response, and so you miss out on the character of songs like, for example, Pure Water, that are hip-hop songs, and the bass is really, really critical to the way the song is supposed to be heard. On top of that, there seems to be consistently in the 3 songs we tested good separation between the bass and the mids. Now there was a little bit of melding, just a tiny bit when you had multiple instruments playing, for example in Angel, but that's to be expected unless you have something that is phenomenal like the Full Cal Clear, which tends to separate everything. It's that good. But for $150 I would say decent separation. At least decent separation between the mids and the bass. Enough so that you can hear the character of the vocalist, you can hear what he or she is saying clearly, and you can still hear the bass and sub-bass response. Overall, I think that the G12 is a surprise for the bass, at least for the bass. And I would not have expected such clarity, undistorted bass from this headphone. But that's the type of reproduction that I am hearing. Now, your mileage might vary slightly if you use a different type of amplifier. So the JDS Labs Element is a very neutral, very clean amplifier and DAC. If you use something that is a bit warmer, the Klipsch Heritage amplifier is probably just a little bit warmer. The iFi amplifiers are warmer. Anything with a Burr Brown chip has a warmer character to it. You're going to get a slightly different response. Not terribly different, but enough in an A and B test. But if you're using a neutral amplifier, I think that you will be able to recreate the same type of listening experience that I have discussed in this video. Speaking of videos, if you enjoy this content, if you enjoy any of my other content, then please consider donating to me on Patreon. For the cost of just $2 a month, which is less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks, you could help support my channel so that I can buy new and old gear to review thoroughly for you. Leave a comment in the comment section below if you want me to review a product. Go ahead and click on that product review form list link in the description below. I hope all of you have a wonderful, amazing rest of your day, and the weekend is coming very quickly. And if you live in the United States, we have a 3-day weekend that's going to start very quickly, very soon. I hope all of you have a wonderful day, and do take care.